Magin of Shabbos, Parshas, Vayigash. Wow. Cliffhanger, we begin with Yehuda walking up to Yosef, Tzofnas Paneach, and he tells him, you better let Binyamin go. Why would he hold on to Binyamin? He wasn't even there when he sold Yosef, our brother. This is not a kapor from the Boine Shalom. This is just you messing with us. Not gonna happen. And the brothers divided up Mitzrayim, the Medrash tells us, and each brother was gonna take out a chelik of Mitzrayim. Naphtali, scouted out the land like in a second. Yehuda had spears coming out of his hairs were like spears poking through his shirt. Wild stuff. It gets very intense over here. Of course, Yosef wasn't phased at all because he knew that whatever he told the brothers, as long as it was emes, they would be makabelet. Yehuda is confronting him and telling him, you have no busha stealing our brother? And Yosef says, you had no busha selling your brother. So it was emes. There was like an amitos there. And he knew that Yehuda would be makabelet as an ish emes. But there's a fascinating moment when Yosef tells them, and this is the pinnacle of the entire saga. He looks at them and he says, he couldn't contain himself, and he says, Ani Yosef, right? He says, I am Yosef. What was he telling them when he says I am Yosef? So I heard from Ephraim Waxman that what he was telling him is that, look, I'm Yosef, you are Yehuda, right? The rest of you each have your own names, you each have your own tafkid, you each have your own job. The Rebbeinu Shalom set it up that your job was to sell me. My job was to go through the ordeal of being sold. Being in prison. Being a viceroy in Mitzrayim is not so pashut either. You think that was like the good part of the story? It's not so simple. It's my job to be able to raise him a Nashon Ephraim in middle of Mitzrayim. That's not an easy thing either. And Yosef, that's my job. My job was to be the Yosef in the story. Your job was to be the brothers in the story. You did your job perfectly. And I think there's a little hint to that message from the Psukim. He tells the brothers, you sold me to Mitzrayim. That was your job. You don't control the results. The Rebbeinu Shalom decides what's going to happen. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, my father told me this from the Yaakov. He says that whenever it's a diktuk issue, whenever the pasuk uses a lashon of Mitzrayim mo, it means towards Mitzrayim, but not to Mitzrayim. I think he brings this down when it comes to Rivka, that she walked towards the Be'era, that she walked towards the Be'er and the water came up to the 3-year-old Rivka. You remember that Ma'aseh, that Medrash? Yosef told him, you sold me Mitzrayim. You want to know something, brothers? You can't sell me to Mitzrayim. You could send me on my way to Mitzrayim, but whether I land up there, what happens to me there, it's not in your control. That has nothing to do with you. Sorry. That was their Rebbeinu Shalom. You have nothing to be scared of. The only tainas that I could have would be to their Rebbeinu Shalom, and I know that he's got my back. It can't get better than this, because if it could, it would. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants only the best for me. So yeah, you did your job selling me Mitzrayim Ma. The ordeal that I have now, that I had, was from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the fact that I am the king of Mitzrayim also, it's from the Rebbeinu Shalom. You had no kesher to that. Yeah, that's why he tells Yaakov that the message was that Yosef is Moishel al Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim isn't Moishel on Yosef. Side Vort. The Rebbeinu Shalom sets up everything. He sets up everything. When it comes to the Hakamas Medina of Eretz Yisrael, there are certain names which stand out. You say something, you say name one of the prime ministers. If you say something like Chaim Weizmann, one of the chevra that was famous for setting up, the 1949 independence of the state of Israel, there are names that pop up. One of the names that does not pop up is Eddie Jacobson, and it turns out that there would be no state of Israel. You wouldn't be able to hop on an El Al flight and just hang out at the Kaisel without Eddie Jacobson. Miza, who's Eddie Jacobson? It's a fascinating story. Mamash Ashkoch Pratas like you can't imagine. Chaim Weizmann wanted to set up a meeting with President Harry Truman. They were going to take a vote in the UN whether Israel would be recognized as a state, a legal, accepted, valid state. And if America voted yes, then the West was in the bag. America has a big shame in the UN, and if Harry Truman would vote for the state of Israel, game over. So they needed Harry Truman on their side. So Chaim Weizmann arranged for an appointment with Harry Truman. The response he got was unwelcoming, to say the least. Harry said, "Don't waste your time. You're uninvited to the White House. I don't want to have a word with an Israeli, with any Jew, with anything to do with the state of Israel. Don't get me involved." And that was it. You know, if he's not on board, no one's on board. What happened? A couple weeks before Chaim Weizmann called up for this meeting, there were a couple Israelis who came to the White House to negotiate something with Harry Truman, and they got, Israelis have like a certain brand, a fire, and a passion, and it rubbed President Harry Truman, the wrong way. They were they were yelling at him. So he said, "I'm done with this, no more." And he told Chaim Weizmann, "Don't even bother. It's a waste of a flight." What are you supposed to do now? There's a couple days left until the vote. Here comes Eddie Jacobson. Who's Eddie Jacobson? Turns out Harry Truman has a best friend named Eddie Jacobson, from Yid. What happened? Eddie Jacobson's parents moved to Kansas when they immigrated from Europe for some business venture. And growing up in Kansas, Eddie got to know a friend, a neighbor, as a 15-year-old kid named Harry Truman. They were really good friends as kids. They played together, I don't know if they went to school together, whatever it was. And then they got drafted into the army together, and they became blood brothers. There was a time during the war when actually Eddie saved Harry Truman's life, which happens when you're in war together, and survived. It was an incredible thing. They had a very, very close relationship. When they came back from war, they went into business together, and they were very successful. Eddie and Harry. What they sell? They sell men's clothing. Yeah. Then came the Great Depression, and every small business went belly up. They were out of commission. Harry said, "I'm done with business. It doesn't work. I'm going into politics." And he did quite well. Eddie said, "I'm going to give another shot at business." He did quite well. Now, Eddie's running his business, and Harry became the president of the United States of America. The Israelis called up Eddie and said, "You have to speak to Harry Truman. Let him just sit down with Chaim Weizmann. That's the only chance of having this bill passed, of having the Israeli state recognized." Eddie said, "I haven't spoken to him in years. What are you talking about? I can just, walk up to the White House and can I speak to Harry Truman?" It's like, "Who?" "I'm his friend. I haven't spoken to him in years. He's the president of the United States." They said, "Look, the Rebbeinu Shalom knows whether there's going to be a state of Israel or not. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows if Yosef Tzaddik is going to be in Mitzrayim or not. Your job is to do your job. And for some weird reason, you are best friends with the president of the United States. Klal Yisrael needs you." In those days, you could just walk up to the White House. I'm not sure how security worked exactly. Apparently, Andrew Jackson had like a massive chunk of cheese. He liked cheese. So there's like a brick of cheese in the White House. Anyone could come and take a piece. I'm not sure. It's funny. Anyway, so Eddie Jacobson walks up to the White House, knocks on the door. "Can I speak to the president?" He said, "I don't know, Secret Service is standing there." And they say, "What would you like to, who, what? So he says, "Well, tell him Eddie Jacobson is here, from Kansas." And Harry Truman comes running down the stairs. And he says, "Oh my goodness, Eddie, how you doing? Come on in." They sit down in the Oval Office. And they're schmoozing like the good old days. War times, business times, bad times, good times, childhood times. And eventually, President Truman looks at Eddie and says, "Tell me, what are you doing here? What could I do for you? What brings you to the White House?" And Eddie tells him, "Look, there's a guy, Chaim Weizmann, who wants to meet with you. He's a good man. They want to do good things." And before he could finish, Harry says, "It's not happening." Sorry. I'm telling you, I'm done with that whole project. It's not on the cards. Sorry. Look, Eddie, you mean a lot to me. It's not happening. So Eddie said, all right, well, appreciate your time. It was nice catching up. And he's about to leave the office. And he's like, come on. Does it make sense? Why in the world would I, Eddie Jacobson, be best friends with the President of the United States? That doesn't just happen. Maybe this is that moment. Maybe my entire existence. Maybe this insane string of Hashgacha Pratis was for this moment. I can't just walk out. And he says, Harry, you always worshipped. I see there are little pictures of... Wasn't Andrew Jackson? Maybe it was Andrew Jackson. On your desk. You're always a big fan of him, and you're always looking, you want to be a president like him. He says, yeah. He says, I look up to Chaim Weizmann like that. He's a good man. Harry Truman turns and looks out the window of the Oval Office. Last time he did that, he was deciding whether to drop an atom bomb on Japan. So things were about to happen. And he says, you know what? For you, Eddie, I'll meet with Chaim Weizmann. Yeah? They set it up. He flew in a couple days later. The meeting went well. And it's just State of Israel. The Rebbeinu Shalom sets up everything. He sets up everything. Everything is ready to go. Yeah, your job is to sell Yosef Mitzrayim. Well, you did your job, says Yosef. My job was to weather the conditions in Mitzrayim, for better or for worse. A lot of for worse. I did Yosef. I need Yosef. Don't worry about it. It's all B'yad Hashem. May we be zeicha to see even when the Rebbeinu Shalom does tough things for us. Odcha ki ani soni. Fatili the Yeshua. That's actually the Yeshua. Sometimes you have to go down to Mitzrayim to see the ultimate Yeshua. May we be zeicha. Odcha ki ani soni. Odcha ki ani soni. Odcha ki ani soni. Odcha ki ani soni. Vate Yeshua, Vate